My dad was a hero in our town, until I discovered his secret that blew our family apart. I grew up believing my dad was a hero. Not the kind you read about in comic books or see on TV with a cape and some cheesy one-liner. My dad was the real deal, a Vietnam vet, a retired fire chief, and the man who built our house with his own hands. He helped neighbors fix their roofs, coached Little League for years, and even paid someone's hospital bills once when they couldn't afford it. In our small Missouri town, he was practically a legend. That's why when everything came crashing down, no one believed me. Not my mom, not my brothers, not even my own wife. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the moment I realized something was off, something rotten hiding behind the framed metals and the perfectly mowed lawn. It started with the foreclosure notice. My wife Kayla and I had just put our 2 kids to bed when I opened the mail and saw it, a thick envelope from a law office with the words, "Final Notice," in big red letters. At first, I thought it was a scam. Then I saw the address. It was for the house my parents lived in. The one my dad had supposedly paid off 30 years ago. "Is this a mistake?" I asked Kayla, holding it up. She frowned and took the letter. "Why would your parents' house be in foreclosure? Didn't your dad pay cash for that place?" "That's what he always said." We called my parents the next morning. Mom sounded flustered, said it must be a clerical error. Dad didn't come to the phone. 2 days later, I drove down there alone. Their front yard was overgrown. That was my second red flag. My dad was religious about his lawn, mowed every Saturday, rain or shine, always in straight lines like a baseball field. Inside, the house smelled like something had died in the walls. Mom looked older than I remembered. Pale, thin, and nervous. Dad was sitting in his recliner watching an old western like nothing was wrong. "Why didn't you tell me about the foreclosure?" I asked. He didn't even flinch. "Handled." "Handled? Dad, the bank says they're seizing the property in 30 days. He clicked the remote, pausing the TV. "I said it's handled, son." It wasn't. And that was the moment I started digging. It's hard to explain what it feels like when the person you admire most turns out to be a stranger. Like someone pulled the rug out from under your childhood and everything good you remember falls down with it. I started with the county clerk's office. I didn't want to snoop, but the foreclosure letter wasn't a joke, and my parents were obviously hiding something. Turns out, Dad had taken out a second mortgage. Then a third. Over the last 10 years, he'd borrowed over $180,000 against the house. That was impossible. My dad hated debt. He lectured us growing up about credit cards and always paying cash. I needed answers. And I wasn't leaving town without them. That night, I confronted him again. This time, he got angry. "You had no right digging into our business," he snapped. "You're about to lose the house, Dad. What do you expect me to do? Stand by while the place you raised us in gets auctioned off? I said it's handled. Then tell me how. What's going on? Is it medical bills? Mom's prescriptions? Gambling?" He went silent. I thought I'd hit a nerve with the gambling question. Dad used to buy the occasional scratch-off, but never anything serious. That night, after he went to bed, I did something I still feel guilty about. I checked the den. Growing up, Dad never let us into the den. It was his space. He kept the door locked most of the time. Even Mom didn't go in there unless she was vacuuming. But that night, the door was open. I walked in and turned on the desk lamp. There were file folders. Stacks of them. Labeled with names I didn't recognize, dozens of them. I opened one. It was a life insurance policy. Someone else's name. A man from Illinois. The next file, same thing. A woman from Texas. Another life insurance policy. They all listed my dad as the beneficiary. My stomach dropped. The next morning, I brought it up. I expected denial. Excuses? Instead, my dad looked me dead in the eye and said, "They were investments." "Investments? These are people's lives." "They were terminal. Every one of them. They needed cash for treatment, or their families. I offered them money up front. Legal, contractual, and blessed by the government. You bought life insurance policies from dying people so you could collect when they died." "Yes." He said it like he was talking about baseball cards. It was legal. Technically. There's a thing called life settlements. People with terminal illnesses sell their policies for a lump sum while they're alive, and the buyer becomes the beneficiary. Dad wasn't lying. He had helped people. But he'd also turned it into a business. And that business was failing. "I paid too much for a couple policies that didn't pan out," he admitted. "Some lived longer than expected. One policy got voided. Another guy had a daughter who contested it and sued me into the ground. I thought I could turn it around, but..." He trailed off. And just like that, the myth of my dad crumbled. After Dad admitted to buying up life insurance policies like baseball cards, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the house. The holidays we'd spent there. The treehouse he built us in the backyard. Every moment I'd admired him, every time I'd told someone, "My dad's the best guy I know," just rang in my head like a bad joke. I didn't tell Mom what I found. Not yet. I wasn't sure if she already knew or if this would crush her. She looked so fragile already, like she was balancing on a thread. But I couldn't let it go. Something didn't add up. If Dad had gotten into financial trouble with these policies, why hadn't he asked for help? He had 4 kids. My brothers and I weren't rich, but we would have figured something out. I called my older brother Darren the next day. He's an accountant out in Kansas City. Do you know anything about Dad's money situation? I asked. Long pause. No. Why? His house is in foreclosure. He's got hundreds of thousands in bad debt, and he's been investing in, let's call them morally questionable insurance schemes. Another pause. That son of a... Darren whispered. You knew something. I didn't know, but I always suspected. A couple years ago, he called and asked if I could help him transfer some assets to an LLC. Wouldn't say why. Just wanted it off the books. I told him no, and he stopped talking to me for 6 months. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just a failed investment. This was a cover-up. And my dad had tried to pull his own sons into it. A week later, things got worse. I got a call from a woman named Angie. She said she used to work with my dad on consulting deals. I assumed she was a lawyer or financial planner. I was wrong. She was a former hospice nurse. And she wasn't just calling to chat. Your father paid me to refer patients, she said bluntly. He told me if I heard of anyone with a decent policy and no family, to send them his way. My blood turned to ice. You're saying my dad hunted dying people? He said he was helping them, she replied. Giving them cash when no one else would. And in fairness, some of them were grateful. But I started to feel weird about it. Like it wasn't about them anymore. It was about the numbers. Why are you telling me this now? Because I heard about the foreclosure. And because I still have the emails. If your dad ever tries to drag me down with him, I'm protecting myself. She sent me copies. And just like that, my dad was no longer a misguided investor. He was a predator. One with a spreadsheet and a smile. I sat on the truth for a while. Too long, maybe. I didn't know what to do with it. My brothers wouldn't believe it. My sister, Emma, idolized Dad to the point of obsession. And Mom, she was still planning his 70th birthday like nothing was wrong. I was going to keep quiet, bury the whole thing, until I got a call from a lawyer in Arkansas. Is this Nathan Calhoun? He asked. Speaking. You're listed as a secondary contact for Joseph Calhoun in this wrongful death civil case. Do you have a moment to discuss the subpoena? A civil case. Against my dad. Apparently, one of the families had found out about the insurance deal. The dying man's sister. She'd contested the policy after the death, but my dad had somehow won the legal battle. Now she was suing him for wrongful influence and emotional distress. He manipulated a dying man, the lawyer said. Got him to sign over everything for a fraction of the payout. We have witnesses. I drove back to my parents' place that weekend. Why didn't you tell me you were being sued? I asked. Dad shrugged. It'll get thrown out. She's bitter. People lash out when they lose someone. But you took advantage of a dying man. He didn't respond. Just stared at me. That's when I noticed something different in his face. Not guilt. Not shame. Resentment. Like I was the one who'd betrayed him. That night, I finally told Mom. I showed her the files. The emails. The lawsuit documents. She sat silently on the couch, staring at the papers, hands trembling. How long? She whispered. 10 years. Maybe more. And then she said something I'll never forget. I thought he was having an affair. What? He was always out late. Always taking calls in the garage. I figured it was another woman. I didn't know it was this. She looked up at me, tears in her eyes. I would have preferred an affair. When we confronted him together, he didn't deny a thing. I did what I had to do. He said coldly. To keep this family afloat. You think your pensions go far? You think Social Security pays for all this? I made sure we had enough. At what cost? Mom said, her voice barely a whisper. Dad stood, his old frame casting a long shadow in the lamplight. At the cost of people who were going to die anyway. I gave them peace. I gave you comfort. And now you throw me to the wolves? It was the first time I ever saw my mom walk out on him. My mom moved in with us the next day. She didn't even pack much, just a suitcase, a box of old photo albums, and her wedding ring, which she left sitting on the kitchen counter. She didn't say a word as we drove away. Just stared out the window like she was watching the wreckage of her life smolder behind her. When we got back to our place, Kayla tried to make her feel welcome. The kids were confused. Why is Nana staying with us? My daughter asked. I didn't know how to explain that the man who once lifted her on his shoulders at the 4th of July parade had used dying people as a retirement plan. Things started to unravel quickly after that. Word of the lawsuit spread. Small towns are fast like that. Once one person knows, everyone does. My dad's reputation took a nosedive overnight. The Legion Hall removed his photo. The fire department didn't return his calls. Even the guy who used to mow lawns with him on Saturdays wouldn't wave from across the street anymore. But the worst part? He blamed me. You brought this into the light, he said, when I tried calling him a week later. You destroyed your own father. You did that all on your own. I snapped. People forget. They forgive. But not when someone they trust turns them against you. He hung up. And just like that, I became the villain in my dad's story. Then came the letter from the IRS. Apparently, Dad hadn't reported several of the life settlement payouts correctly. Some weren't even in his name anymore. He tried to use a network of shell LLCs and fake consulting firms to hide the income. And guess who was listed as a co-signer on one of those shell companies? Me. That transfer he asked Darren to help with? The one he denied? Turns out, Dad had forged my digital signature on a filing. I was officially part owner of a company I'd never heard of, and now I was getting audited. I hired a lawyer. Had to. Kayla was furious. Not at me, but at what this meant for our family. Our mortgage. Our kids' college funds. I told her I'd fix it. That I'd clear my name. But it wasn't just about legality anymore. It was about the truth. I confronted Dad one last time. I didn't go to the house. He wouldn't answer the door. Instead, I met him at the diner where he used to take me for pancakes every Saturday growing up. He was already sitting at the booth when I arrived. No smile. No handshake. Just the cold stare of a man who thought I owed him something. You forged my name on business documents, I said flatly. I built those companies for you boys, he replied. When I die, you inherit everything. That was the plan. What part of this feels like a gift, Dad? He didn't answer. I slid a folder across the table. This is a formal declaration of separation. Financial, legal, personal. My lawyer says you'll be served by the end of the week. He didn't touch the folder. You think you're better than me? He said quietly. No, I said, standing up. Just different. He didn't stop me when I walked away. A month passed. Mom settled in with us. The house finally went into foreclosure. My dad moved into a one-bedroom rental outside town. The lawsuit escalated. Depositions began. The IRS audit revealed even more fraud than we realized. And then came the kicker. My youngest brother, Brian, who'd been mostly silent through all of this, called me one night out of the blue. He was crying. I need to tell you something, he said. Dad, he didn't just forge your name. What do you mean? He used mine too. And Emma's. But it's worse. He used Grandma's name. After she died. I nearly dropped the phone. He what? There's an annuity account. He kept drawing from it for 2 years after she passed. Said it was to cover tax gaps in his investment deals. I found the paperwork. I was cleaning out some boxes from the garage. So now we were looking at posthumous financial fraud. And possible jail time. Emma refused to believe it. She accused Brian and me of lying. Said we were just trying to destroy the family for some twisted sense of justice. But Darren backed us. And when we showed Emma the forged signature on Grandma's annuity withdrawals, ones dated 18 months after her funeral, she finally broke. He said he needed help. She whispered. Said he was trying to keep us all afloat. The image of our dad, our protector, our foundation, crumbled in front of us. We weren't a family anymore. We were a crime scene. By the time summer rolled around, my family was a collection of burned bridges. Darren had cut all ties with Dad. Emma refused to return his calls but still hadn't spoken to Mom since she left him. Brian was spiraling. He'd taken a leave of absence from work and started seeing a therapist. We were all just floating in the wreckage of who we thought we were. And meanwhile, I was still fending off auditors and lawyers like a full-time job. Every time I thought it couldn't get worse, another document arrived. A subpoena here. A certified letter there. Always with Dad's name in bold and mine right under it. He didn't even deny forging our names anymore. It was for the family. Was all he kept saying. Like that excuse covered every lie, every betrayal. But that wasn't the part that broke me. The part that did? Mom found a storage unit. It happened completely by accident. She was sorting through Dad's financial records that she'd taken when she left. Old boxes of tax filings, warranty papers, the usual junk. Inside one folder was a payment receipt from a place called Jefferson Hills Storage, dated just 2 months prior. She asked me to come with her. I rented a truck, half expecting it to be empty or filled with junk from our childhood, boxes of clothes, maybe old yard tools. Instead, we found something else. Rows of sealed bins and fireproof briefcases, neatly organized. Mom opened the first bin and gasped. Stacks of cash. Neatly bound, labeled by year. Tens of thousands. 50s, hundreds, even $2 bills. We opened 3 more bins, same story. Over $300,000 in hard cash. No receipts. No bank slips. No paper trail. And then I opened one of the briefcases, and nearly passed out. Inside were 4 passports, each under a different alias. All with Dad's photo. And a bundle of printed tickets, domestic and international flights. Most were old. But one was scheduled for 2 weeks from now. He was planning to run. We called Darren and Brian. They rushed over that night. We laid everything out in my garage, like it was evidence in some murder trial. Brian said what we were all thinking. We should call the FBI. Darren, ever the pragmatic one, pulled out his phone and said, No. First, we talk to a criminal defense lawyer. Because if any of this is tied to our names, we're all in danger. And Emma? She finally came over the next morning. Silent, pale, stunned. She just stared at the briefcase for a full minute before whispering. He was going to leave us all behind. I wish I could say we stayed united after that. But money, and trauma, does strange things to people. Brian wanted to burn the whole thing down. Expose him. Make it public. Put him behind bars. Emma, in full reversal, now wanted to protect him. He's old. He's sick. If we go to the feds, he'll die in prison. Mom just sat in a chair, looking at nothing, while the four of us argued like kids again. Finally, I took charge. We don't make any decisions until we get a lawyer. Period. We hired a firm from St. Louis. They were sharp, no nonsense. One look at the stash, and the lawyer whistled through his teeth. This is money laundering, he said. Probably tax evasion. Possibly wire fraud, depending on how the cash was funneled. And if he forged passports or IDs to collect settlements using false identities, that's federal. That's when I asked the hardest question of all. Can we go to jail just for knowing about this? The lawyer didn't sugarcoat it. If your names are on any accounts, filings, or payouts? Yes. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept going over it all in my head. The man who raised me, who gave me advice about girls, who taught me how to throw a baseball, he was gone. Replaced by someone else. Someone dangerous. I drove to his place the next morning. He was sitting on the porch like nothing had happened. Drinking sweet tea. Wearing that faded army ball cap he always wore when I was a kid. You were going to leave, I said. We found the passports. The tickets. The money. He didn't even flinch. I thought you might, he said calmly. Guess I underestimated how curious you still are. You were going to run away and leave all of us with your mess. I'm the mess, he said, sipping his drink. You never understood that. All this time, you thought I was a builder. A provider. I was just a survivor, Nate. That's all I've ever been. No. You were a coward. He didn't respond. Just looked out at the street like he was watching the past slip away. 3 days later, my dad disappeared. No note. No warning. Just gone. His car was left behind. Phone, too. No withdrawals, no purchases. He vanished like smoke in the wind. The FBI got involved. Turns out, the passports were real. Not government-issued, of course, but good enough to pass casual scrutiny. Fake names. Fake histories. A full-blown exit strategy. We searched every lead. Old friends. Known contacts. Nothing. It was like he evaporated. And just when we thought the chaos had peaked, another letter arrived. From a man in Arizona. Said he used to be in a network with my father. That they'd worked together on some special projects. And that the captain had abandoned ship. We were being watched. The letter wasn't threatening. It was worse. It was curious. You're not like him, it said. But you share his blood. And that means something. We gave the letter to the FBI. And now they're watching us, too. After Dad disappeared, the FBI set up camp in our lives. They interviewed each of us, separately. Agents came to our homes, reviewed our financials, requested access to every email, account, or hard drive we'd ever touched that might link us to Dad's schemes. My kids had to be taken out of school for a week. Brian started having panic attacks. Emma's husband filed for separation, said he couldn't raise their kids in a house connected to federal crimes. But Mom? Mom was silent. She didn't cry. Didn't panic. Just watched the world fall apart like it was a slow-motion train wreck she'd seen coming for years. And then one day, she knocked on my bedroom door while I was reading and said something that chilled me. There's something I didn't tell them. Or you. It was a letter. Not the kind Dad had been leaving us in the form of messes or fake paperwork, but a real letter. Handwritten. Torn at the edges. Dated 3 years ago. She pulled it from a Bible. I found this in his nightstand the year before everything started going downhill, she said. I thought it was a joke at first. A piece of fiction. But now. I took it and read the first few lines. If you're reading this, it means I'm close to the edge. I tried to stop. I told myself it was temporary. That once we had enough, I'd walk away. But there's no such thing as enough when you build your life on debt and death. It went on to describe places he'd hidden things, backup plans, funds. For emergencies. And names of people he used to trust, but who might turn. There was one phrase that stood out. The place where I buried the shame. It's still there, untouched. I never had the courage to dig it up. Mom had never understood what it meant. But now it felt like a map. I called Brian and Darren. Told them we needed to go back to the old house. It had been empty for weeks. The bank hadn't sold it yet. The lawn was a jungle, windows layered in grime. But the property line, the backyard, the woods behind the fence, that was still ours in spirit. We walked to the shed. The same one Dad built when I was 9. Used to store bikes, shovels, gardening tools. In the far corner, the dirt had clearly been disturbed before. Long ago. Covered again. A stone laid across it like a forgotten grave marker. We dug. About 2 feet down, we hit it, a large military duffel bag, sealed and wrapped in plastic. Inside? Not cash. Not passports. Ledgers. Handwritten logs dating back 15 years. Names. Dates. Amounts. Notes about approach strategy, expected timelines. And, sickeningly, phrases like final stage confirmed. And payout within 3 to 5 months. Each entry was a person. A life reduced to a dollar figure and a countdown. We handed it over to the FBI the next day. What followed was a media firestorm. Somehow, word got out. Maybe leaked by the FBI, maybe from someone in the town. It didn't matter. The story exploded. Retired fire chief linked to national insurance death ring. Talk shows ran segments. Internet sleuths created timelines. Former hospice workers came forward. 2 states launched investigations into facilities where Dad had been seen visiting patients. And the question everyone asked, over and over, was, where is he now? That question was finally answered 6 weeks later. A man in southern Utah reported a strange encounter. He ran a gas station in a small desert town. A quiet older man with a familiar face came through, paying in cash. Asked if the border route to the canyon trail was still passable. The man behind the counter, an Army vet, recognized the ball cap first. It said, 101st Airborne. He called the tip in the next day. Within 48 hours, the FBI found Dad's rental car abandoned at the edge of a hiking trail in a remote canyon. His bag was in the trunk. Inside were maps, old IDs, canned food, and a burner phone. They searched the canyon for 5 days. No sign. Some thought he'd fallen. Others believed he staged the whole thing. A few agents said privately they thought he'd crossed into Mexico, or died out there on purpose, to bury the truth with him. But the final twist? That burner phone had a single contact listed. No name. Just a number. And it matched a phone found in a safety deposit box in St. Louis, registered under a shell company with Emma's name. I confronted her. She denied it at first. Said she didn't know anything about a safety deposit box. That someone must have used her name. That it was all just part of the fraud Dad created. But she wouldn't look me in the eye. Not once. Then Darren pulled up a bank photo log. It was Emma. 3 months before Dad disappeared, she'd visited that same branch. Signed in using an ID. Her signature matched the one on file. She finally cracked. He begged me. She sobbed. He said he'd be gone soon anyway. That if I helped him just this once, he'd make sure we never got dragged down with him. And you believed him? I wanted to. We didn't turn her in. Not yet. We should have. But after everything, the idea of destroying one more member of our family felt like more than we could carry. The FBI suspected she knew something, but without proof she'd aided in his escape, all they had was a signature and a visit to a box she claimed she was told was a trust fund cleanup. But we knew. And she knew we knew. We haven't spoken since. After Emma's confession, everything changed again. We didn't turn her in. I still don't know if that was the right call. Darren didn't speak to her. Brian called her a coward and blocked her number. Mom barely said a word the next week, just sat on the back porch, staring into the yard like she expected Dad to come walking up the steps like it was Sunday afternoon in 1998. The media circus kept spinning. The FBI kept calling. And every day, people in town whispered more loudly. One lady at the grocery store turned to her friend and said, "That's the son, the one whose dad got all those poor people killed for their insurance money." Like I was the criminal. Like I forged the documents, buried the cash, vanished into a desert canyon. I left my cart in the aisle and drove home in silence. Then, 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address. No stamp. Just my name. Handwritten. The paper was thick. Heavy. Not the kind you buy at a regular store. The inside was even stranger, a single page, folded carefully, with the old family photo we'd lost years ago taped to the top corner. We were all there. Dad in the center, smiling wide. I was about 10. Mom had her hand on my shoulder. Emma had bangs and a missing front tooth. And beneath it, in that unmistakable handwriting, "You think this ends with me. But it doesn't. I built something none of you understood. And someday you'll need it." Inside the tree. No signature. No date. Just those words. Inside the tree. I showed the letter to Mom. She went pale. "Do you remember that old elm?" she asked. "The one by the creek behind the fence?" We hadn't thought about that tree in years. It was part of our childhood. We carved our initials into it. Swung from its branches. It split in a lightning storm one summer, but Dad never cut it down. We drove back to the old property. It was posted for auction now, but I knew the realtors hadn't fenced off the back trail yet. The woods behind it were still open. The elm tree stood like a relic, half split, blackened with age and rot. There was a hollow in the trunk. I reached inside. At first, nothing. Then my fingers brushed something smooth and plastic. I pulled it out. A sealed container. Weatherproof. Inside it? A USB drive and another envelope. The letter this time was typed. More formal. If you've found this, it means I've disappeared, and the last door has been opened. The USB contains a master ledger. Names. Payments. Wire routes. Bank accounts off the books. You'll see I left a trust in place, one with instructions. Not for the family. For the victims. I didn't know what to say. Neither did Mom. We drove home in silence and plugged the drive into my laptop. He was telling the truth. A full digital archive, hundreds of files. Spreadsheets tracking every policy, every payout, every client. But also, a trust account, $2.4 million, locked in a blind foreign fund with instructions to activate upon confirmation of his death or disappearance. Half was earmarked for a legal firm in Chicago with instructions to establish reparations. The other half? Left to me. With a clause. If my son accepts this money, he accepts my legacy. If he declines, it goes to the firm, every last cent. This is the burden of blood. I stared at the screen for hours. I could have wiped out our mortgage. Paid off Mom's debt. Set my kids up for college and then some. But that clause. Accepts my legacy. I thought of every person whose name had been in those ledgers. Every payout projection. Every final stage diagnosis he turned into a spreadsheet entry. I called Darren. He came over and read the letter. Then he looked at me and said, "You know what he's doing, right?" "What?" "Trying to make you into him. One last move. One last game." He was right. I transferred the full sum to the legal firm in Chicago. Every cent. A week later, the story broke again. Son of insurance scam fugitive donates $2.4 million to victim compensation fund. Some outlets called it redemption. Others speculated I took the money and made it look like a gesture to avoid charges. Didn't matter. We were done. Emma quietly left town. Darren went back to his practice. Brian finally started therapy for real and moved in with Mom for a while. The FBI stopped calling. And Dad? Still missing. Still officially presumed dead. But the body never surfaced. Some say he drowned in that canyon. Some think he escaped to Belize. There's even a Reddit thread where someone claims they saw him running a surf shack in Nicaragua under the name Tommy Rivers. I don't care anymore. I burned the rest of the letters. And I don't tell my kids about their grandfather. They think he died when they were little. In some ways, that's the only truth I still believe. 6 months passed. No sightings. No calls. No bodies. Dad was officially listed as missing and presumed deceased. The FBI finally backed off. The lawsuits began to stall. With the victims' fund in place, many families dropped their claims or redirected them toward restitution. Most of them never contacted us directly. But then one did. A woman named Lucinda Paxton. Her father, Charles, was one of the earliest clients Dad had signed a life settlement with. He had ALS. Died in 2014. Lucinda had been estranged from him for years. She only found out about the policy deal when the probate process revealed Dad as the sole beneficiary. She tried to contest it but lost. Now, 10 years later, she reached out, not to sue, but to talk. "I don't want money," she wrote in her email. "I want to understand why." I flew to Atlanta to meet her. I owed her that much. She was in her 50s, calm, sharp-eyed, polite. She didn't scream at me. Didn't throw accusations. She just slid a manila folder across the cafe table and said, "This was in my dad's personal things. I've read it 100 times. I think you should, too." Inside was a typed letter. "To whomever finds this. If you're reading this, I've agreed to sell my life insurance policy to a man named Joseph Calhoun. He tells me I'm being smart. That this is the one thing I can still control. That I'm not a burden to my daughter or the world if I make peace with my end. I don't know if he's right. But I feel heard. He sat with me for hours. Listened to my stories. Asked about my childhood. Told me his dad had been cruel to him too, once. He didn't talk like a businessman. He talked like a son. So I signed. If he lied to me, then shame on him. But if he meant it, then maybe I wasn't alone at the end." I sat there for 10 minutes, unable to speak. Lucinda finally broke the silence. "Did he do that with everyone?" I shook my head. "I don't know. I don't think so." She nodded slowly. "Then maybe my father was lucky." I don't know if she meant it, or if she was just trying to make peace. But something about that letter lodged in my gut like a shard of glass. Because it didn't match the monster I thought I knew. Back home, I told Mom about it. She didn't cry. Didn't say much. Just folded the letter carefully and placed it in her old jewelry box. That night I couldn't sleep. So I did something reckless. I went back into Dad's old backup drive. The one I'd given the lawyers, the one we thought we'd archived and erased. I pulled up the unfiled folder, hundreds of loose documents, personal scans, half-written emails, and audio files that no one had touched. One audio file was titled simply, "For him." I clicked play. "If you're listening, you finally went snooping where I always knew you would. I was never good at saying things face to face, Nate. I thought you might understand one day, if things got bad enough, or far enough away. I didn't start out planning any of this. The first guy, he was in hospice. Told me he wished his policy could help his son instead of getting eaten up by estate taxes. I said I'd find a way. And I did. But then someone else asked. And then another. It grew legs. And somewhere in there, I started pretending I was doing it for the good. But really? I think I like the control. I couldn't save everyone. I couldn't even save myself. But I could make sure you boys never had to wonder where your next paycheck came from. What I didn't realize was, you didn't want my money. You wanted my truth. And I didn't have the guts to give it to you." The recording ended there. Not with a confession. Not with redemption. Just a moment of raw honesty. And it wrecked me. The next day, I finally told my kids the truth. Not the full story, just enough. That their grandfather made mistakes. That he helped people, and hurt people, and sometimes couldn't tell the difference. That we all carry pieces of the people who raised us, but we're not required to carry their shame. They asked if he was dead. "I don't know," I said. And that was the truth, too. It's been over a year now since Dad disappeared. No body ever found. No charges ever filed. Just a trail of chaos, stained names, broken relationships, and the ghost of a man none of us really knew. Brian's doing better. He's working again. Married a woman he met in group therapy, believe it or not. They're expecting their first baby in the fall. Darren and I talk more now than we ever did growing up. Trauma bonds, I guess. He still keeps a tight lock on anything financial, but for the first time in years, he seems relaxed. Emma moved to Oregon. Started over. She sends postcards sometimes, always signed E. We haven't spoken since she left, and honestly, I don't know if we ever will again. And Mom? She's the one who changed the most. Not overnight. But slowly. She started painting again. Adopted a dog. Found a rhythm. She says she finally stopped waiting for the phone to ring. I haven't. Not really. Then, about 6 weeks ago, I got a call from a number with no caller ID. I let it go to voicemail. The message was short. Male voice. No name. If you ever want real answers, go to the place he never talked about. The cabin. The one he inherited but never touched. Look under the floorboards. You'll know it when you see it. Click. At first, I thought it was a prank. I almost deleted it. But then I remembered something. A half memory, barely there, Dad once mentioning an old family cabin in Missouri. Said it was creaky, full of spiders, no electricity. He hated it. Never took us there. I asked Mom about it. She went still. I forgot that place existed, she said. He never wanted to talk about it. Ever. She gave me the location. Scribbled it on the back of a grocery receipt like she was afraid to write it down properly. I drove out the next day. It took hours to find the place. Hidden up an old logging trail. No signage, barely a structure at this point, just a small, one-room shack overgrown with vines and moss. Inside, it smelled like old wood, mildew, and forgotten time. The floorboards creaked with every step. And near the back corner, one of them was slightly loose. I pried it up. And there it was, a small black box. Velvet-lined. Heavy. Inside were an old photograph of a young man I didn't recognize standing with my father, both in military uniforms. A dog tag that didn't match Dad's name. And a USB stick. I drove back to my motel and plugged the drive into my laptop. It contained just one file. A video. Grainy. Recorded from a phone propped up on what looked like a kitchen counter. Dad sat facing the camera. No cap. No smile. Just tired. This is for the day when everything burns down. When the last bridge is ash and the people I love don't know what was real anymore. There was a man I served with in Desert Storm. His name was William Wexler. We got ambushed. I lived. He didn't. He told me stories before he died, about his family, his regrets, the son he hadn't seen since he was 5. And before he passed, he made me swear I'd find his son and make sure he was okay. That I'd give him something, anything, to prove he hadn't been forgotten. I couldn't find the kid. But I did find out Wexler had a life insurance policy. One nobody had claimed. And I claimed it. That was the first one. He paused. Looked straight into the lens. I told myself it was fate. That I'd earned it. That if I could use it to help my family, it would justify the lie. And when the money didn't destroy us, I did it again. And again. Until I didn't know who I was anymore. He looked down, hands shaking. Then he laughed, a small, bitter sound. So I tried to leave a trail of clues. Not because I wanted to be found. but because some part of me wanted to be understood. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But maybe you'll tell my granddaughter someday that her granddad was human. Flawed. Scared. And that even though he failed, he tried to leave something behind that mattered. The rest is up to you. The screen faded to black. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, in a cheap motel room off a two-lane road in rural Missouri, holding a box of evidence that the man I knew wasn't just a criminal, but something worse. A coward who knew exactly what he was. But also, maybe something else. I turned the box over. Under the velvet lining was a folded note. In Dad's handwriting. Burn it. Or don't. Either way, now you decide what survives. I brought the box home. Didn't tell anyone about the video. Didn't hand it over to the FBI. Didn't burn it either. It's in my attic. Still unopened. Still waiting. Because the truth is, I don't know what kind of man I want to be. The son who finally cuts the chain of legacy and walks away from all of it. Or the one who keeps searching, for closure, for truth, maybe even for redemption. But I know this. My father's story is over. Mine is just beginning.